everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte. What's going on, 49er fans? Jason Aponte with Akash from Niners Nation joining me. I got it this way. Yep, I got it right.
You got it right.
He's like to my right on the screen. But Akash, what's up, buddy?
What's up, Jason? It's been a long time, man. But my close friends on here, so glad to hop on, talk some 49ers ball. Love that intro, by the way. It's sick. I haven't told you before, but
Oh, appreciate that, man. And yeah, for real, like if you guys don't know, like there's a lot of internet friends that you have, right? And like guys that like Akash is my guy for real, like in real life, We haven't necessarily met, but Akash is my guy for real. So like, yeah, he's right, man. It just took us a while to get this going. Shout out to everybody that's in here right now. I know that the Warriors play basketball today also. So shout out to everybody that's tapped in with us right now. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, join that Spicy Squad so you can join in on the call-in shows and everything. But Akash, I usually don't like to feed into certain things, right? Like certain things in terms of things that really we can't have actual analysis about, right? But I think there is something that's a little bit on my heart, something that I want to get off my chest that has kind of been out there a little bit, some things that have got me a little bit frustrated. And who better to do it with than someone who is so down the line, straight, level-headed analysis, but you. So you can give the level-headed analysis, and I will give the emotional, upset, angry type stuff. But there's been a lot of talk about Trey Lance underwhelming to the staff. And I think there was some quotes that came out because Rich Scangarello, new offensive coordinator for Kentucky, right? I believe that's what he is
he's
now.
at Kentucky. Yep.
He went on a podcast and was talking about basically the traits that he looks for in a quarterback, and everything that he was talking about makes it seem like anybody who was giving any information about Mac at 3 was him. And anyone who is saying anything about anybody underwhelming, it was him. Akash, thoughts on Rich Scangarello, how he's done, and this whole new thing that is coming around with Trey Lance, since it feels like everything is gravitating away from Deebo Samuel.
I know. Finally, we've exhausted the Jim Garoppolo stuff, then the Deebo Samuel stuff, and now I guess we just need something else to talk about. So we're going to talk about Scangarello and Lance. But I finally got to listening to the episode where Rich Scangarello was on with Greg Cosell and someone else. And shout out to Grant for finding that from like March. And, you know, if you haven't listened to it, Scangarello doesn't actually mention Trey Lance's name. He doesn't list what his preferred quarterbacks were from last year. He just talks about the traits he looks for. And some of the traits, like you mentioned, were basically like anticipation. How does that quarterback perform under pressure when he's getting peppered in the pocket? Can he make the throws? Can he throw, for yak? Be, on target? The things that you kind of talk about with Jimmy Garoppolo or a Mac Jones or, that type quarterback was effectively what Scangarello was describing. And, the one quote that Grant picked up on, which is, you don't just want a guy that throws 70-yard bombs down the field. You want someone that can hang in there and make the tough plays, make the winning plays, etc. He also mentioned that, 1 year college starters just can't start in the NFL day one. So, everything he said kind of alluded to the fact that, if he had to rank his quarterbacks last year when the 49ers were picking at 3, he would have had Mac Jones higher than Trey Lance, probably higher than Justin Fields. And it's interesting because they ended up obviously picking Trey Lance, and must have been weird having him in the quarterback room. Wonder what that dynamic was like. Wonder how Rich performed. It's clear it wasn't up to Kyle's expectations because he's not here any longer. But just weird that now he's going on a podcast and basically putting that on blast.
And all right, if I could be frank, and I think this is what everybody's here for, because I've been good. I've been level-headed lately. I've been trying to give, good level-headed analysis. Let me just be frank. I'll be frank, you be Akash, right? Rich Scangarello's not good at his job at all in any form or fashion. And here's how I know. Denver, Philly, you're out in a year. Jimmy Garoppolo has not made one single stride under your tutelage. Not one stride. the same guy from 2017 all the way until this time now. What if I could hearken to Office Space and date myself a little bit, what exactly, Rich Scangarello, do you do here for the 49ers? Because I don't know what you do. It's funny to me to hear him say all those things that you talked about, Akash. Guy with yak, throws with anticipation, a leader.
Yep.
You're literally describing how people describe Jimmy Garoppolo. You know what I find funny, Akash? And you and I text about this. He's literally going to be the offensive coordinator for a quarterback at Kentucky that has the same traits as Trey Lance. Make it make sense, man. Make it make sense.
Insane.
And when he doesn't succeed, is Rich Scangarello going to turn around and say, well, look, I tried to tell you, For me, all of these things that are coming out now are indicative of a guy who is not good at his job and is looking for cop-outs in a way where I tried to tell you, I said this, and I left. Dude, Rich Scangarello, for me, is a guy who is just now trying to find ways to explain why his quarterbacks have not progressed. And also, Akash, when he talks about what Lance does and doesn't do well, can't that be improved on? Why are you there then?
That's the part I didn't understand. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. Like in a perfect world, you'd have a quarterback that can throw 70-yard bombs down the field and do all the things that he listed. Like, why are those things like one or the other? And ultimately, like to your original question, why did someone tell Matt Lombardo, who I hadn't heard of before that tweet, why did someone tell him that Trey Lance was underwhelming? And, from our perspective on the outside, going into last season, we all said, Trey Lance should start out the gate. He should play over Jimmy Garoppolo. He needs these reps, etc. And I think we had high expectations for Lance going into last season, which I guess realistically was just never the plan, right? I think going in, how the 49ers, how Kyle Shanahan viewed it, 21-year-old kid, hasn't played real football in a year, really only has 1 year of experience. He's just going to sit and develop. We have this team that's ready to win now. If Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy, we're going to be competitive, and then we'll see. We'll let the chips fall where they may. And I guess just because of our expectations on the outside, we were like, Lance the whole time, and it just didn't work out that way. So I think it's unfair to say that he's been underwhelming when, the whole time this was kind of the plan, to redshirt him, to essentially see what he's got. If the season went off the rails, you can play Trey Lance. They kept it together. They made the NFC Championship game. And now this offseason, this next 40 days, that's where Trey Lance got to prove himself and what he learned in that year of sitting behind Jimmy Garoppolo. And now can he just take reins of the starting job and just run with it? So say overwhelming so far is just unfair to him, in my opinion.
And that's what's funny, Akash. I don't want to be that guy, but let's take this from Ashley real quick, and I'll finish my thoughts. She said that he was on the game today and he doubled down as well too. And he also said he thought that he's hearing that Lance didn't have the arm strength. I don't want to be this guy, Akash. I really don't. I didn't see any of these guys at camp. I was at camp every single day. Okay? Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy that pulls cards and just says, dude, I didn't see you. You weren't there. So for all the people that tell me about Trey Lance not progressing, Trey Lance not beating him out, were you there? Were you there? And there's no video of what actually really happened, because if you've ever been at camp, you're not allowed to film anything. And that is Kyle Shanahan's rules. So for everybody who says, well, at camp, he didn't beat out Jimmy and, he's not progressing at practice. You weren't at camp. You weren't at practice. I don't listen to any of you. You know what I listen to? These two things that I got right here in my head. My eyes showed me arm strength that I saw every single day and every single time Trey Lance ripped the ball. Again, 49er fans, I want to be very cautious when I say this. They tend to overreact to certain things. And call me out on this if you think that I'm wrong. But when you look at who's saying what, you're overreacting to someone who heard something from someone else who wasn't even at camp. And that's the problem that I have so much with this Lombardo thing. And that's why I pulled up the receipt of him talking about Trey Lance and how much he liked him. Yeah. So here's my thing. You could be Matt Lombardo and put out that tweet saying, I have sources that say he's underwhelming. But my initial analysis was this. He didn't do that. You know why he didn't do that? He knew what would draw traction to that tweet was just by saying, I've got people that are saying things that are underwhelming. You could literally do both and keep your analysis of it. It's hard for me to listen to people. I was at camp every day. I saw who was there. I looked around. If you weren't there, I don't care what you have to say. Respectfully. That's all I have to say about that. Respectfully, I don't care.
The other thing is, I feel like if you say something negative about the 49ers, it gains so much traction, so much attention so quickly, just massive fan base, especially online. It seems to pick up steam quickly, and especially with the Deebo Samuel stuff, right? I guess that was the first time I feel like nationally they got perception for, damn, this fan base, watches and monitors like every little thing. So, yeah, I don't know where it's coming from. It seems baseless, and I feel like you just got to give Trey Lance a clean start going into his second season and just see what he does, I think this is his chance. If he struggles, in OTAs or training camp when you're there, when we're there, then, okay, we can say, all right, well, there's some reason for concern, but up until then, I think it's unfair to say anything. You should give him a clean slate and just see what happens.
Yeah, and all this stuff started, I think, with the national reporters, because I've had this discussion with so many people. The national reporters are not different from content creators like you, many people, right? We're all trying to find a way to have people have eyes on our content. The thing is the Mac at 3 stuff, when they saw that the like fever pitch that they got 49er fans to, they said, oh, okay, here's the hot button. Here's what we know we need to do. So when it changed from Mac not being there, then it changed to, well, Jimmy's going to be here another year, and I wouldn't necessarily. So these national reporters, for as much as you want to call out podcasters, people on YouTube, content creators, they're the same as all of us in certain ways. And many of them need to draw eyes to their content. And they know that 49er fans are tapped in, will overreact to certain things, and they know exactly what they're doing. They're shaking up the hornet's nest when you do things like that and you say things like that, because they know the attention that it will draw. So for many people that call us, clickbaiters, whatever it is, that's your national media. Adam Schefter, all of these guys, they all know exactly what they're doing when they say things about, well, I could see Jimmy being here another year, even if in their own mind they know that doesn't make sense or it's actually feasible. They just know that will draw up attention and start conversation more than anything. But this Trey Lance thing, again, if you weren't there, and if you're not going to be there at camp again, I don't want to hear it. I don't care. I really don't care what you have to say. Again, if you were there and you have your own opinion, cool. I'm going to listen to your opinion and I want to hear you out. But for you to say that you heard it from someone else and it's literally the opposite of what I saw, I have no use for the information, and I don't want to draw attention to it other than us speaking about it. This is the first time that I have spoken about on this channel about this whole story, and I thought it was best to speak about it with you because you're so level-headed and you would be able to, keep me on the rails.
Just keep
so I don't flood. Yeah, keep me in check. That's it.
And the other thing is, like, what does underwhelming mean, right? Is he referring to like his accuracy, his arm strength, like his knowledge of the playbook, like his, when he's on the field, is he like not making the right reads? And here's the thing about training camp, right? As media, you go watch or whatever. The only thing you could really assess is, okay, is Trey Lance making all the throws? Is he hitting guys in stride? Is he throwing the ball down the field? Like, the stuff that we don't know is like what the coaches are telling him behind the scenes, right? Are they, is Trey Lance, throwing the ball to the right spots? Is he going through his progressions properly? Is he assessing the defense properly? Like, none of that stuff we know because we're just not, we don't know what the calls are on either side and all that kind of stuff. So, it's hard for anybody on the outside to assess, Trey Lance from just training camp play and be like, okay, he's underwhelming or overwhelmed or whatever the case is. So it just seemed kind of baseless and just unfair to Trey Lance. Just let the guy play. He's 22. He just turned 22 today. Just let him play.
For sure. And I feel like, excuse me, so much of people that are perpetuating whatever narrative against Trey Lance is more an infatuation to be right instead of getting it right. And what I mean by that is, when you dig in on a stance and you say, I think Trey Lance isn't going to play well, you're going to only focus on the things that will help your argument, as opposed to taking new information in and being able to make an objective statement. And I think that's kind of where we are. And I do feel that the national media is a little bit burned about the Mac at 3 stuff. And they're kind of trying to get at the 49ers a little bit and trying to, because there were so many people that were so convinced for so long. And then all of a sudden that goes away. And now their way of poking back is, hey, Jimmy's going to be here another year. They don't believe in Trey Lance and those type of things. Again, everything, and not just in sports media, life is about relationships and about building those sort of relationships. And I feel that a lot of people were burned by whatever information Scangarello or whoever the hell was giving them that it was Mac, because nobody is giving out information of who the pick was, that they feel a need to get the 49ers back a little bit in terms of bringing all this stuff up. That is my tinfoil hat theory on this, at least.
And, so, going into the draft last year, and Shanahan and Lynch talked about this, and when you're taking a quarterback, you're at 3, you have your entire offensive staff watch all these quarterbacks, all your scouts, everyone has an opinion, right? And Rich Scangarello, whatever, he's not thinking like value. He's not thinking, oh, they're picking 3, they traded 3 first-round picks, like we're looking for this, and this. He's probably just asked, like, watch all these quarterbacks, tell me which ones you like better. And so based off of, his conversation on that podcast, you'd figure he probably liked Mac Jones the most, just given his experience, given how tough he was in the pocket, given how he threw with anticipation to those receivers at Alabama. Just it basically alluded to the fact that he liked Jones the most. And he mentioned he liked Kenny Pickett in this class. And I would say Kenny Pickett kind of like a poor man's Mac Jones, right? So that would allude you to think that, he probably had Jones ranked higher than the other guys in this class, in that class. And ultimately his opinion, he gives that input to Shanahan and Lynch, but he's not a decision maker, right? And I'm sure a bunch of other guys had a bunch of different opinions on that staff, but ultimately once they made the pick for Trey Lance, it's like, okay, Scangarello, like, did you go all in? Did you put in, all your effort this last season in developing Trey Lance and working with him? That's really the part that I'm interested in. And I'm sure we'll just never know, what that quarterback room was truly like this past season, with the quarterback coach maybe not necessarily favoring the guy that they ended up taking, and then obviously having Jimmy Garoppolo in the room, and just seems like a mess.
Right. All right. One last question about this, and just a quick answer. What in your eyes would be a successful season for Trey Lance? Not record. Like, what do you feel would be something that's stepping in the right direction for him, that you would say that was a successful season regardless of record?
Let's take the win-loss record out of it, because I think the 49ers roster is really, really good, and they should be competitive as long as Trey Lance or if Jimmy Garoppolo's on the roster. One of those guys stays healthy, they should be really good. But I'd say a successful season for Lance is just, becoming the starter for this team, becoming that quote-unquote leader as the quarterback, and, making meaningful plays along the season. He's going to make mistakes. There's going to be times he throws ugly interceptions. He's going to miss reads. He's going to miss throws. You and I are going to tweet the all 22 clips, I'm sure. We're going to, bang on him for it. But can he make enough plays and enough games to just keep the train moving along? Because this team has talent on offense. It's going to have a really, really good defense. Can just Trey Lance just keep the show on the track, similar to what Jimmy Garoppolo did last season, right? Jimmy Garoppolo very up and down last season, but in certain instances, he made enough plays to get them to where they needed to go. And can just Trey Lance do that as a 22-year-old with huge expectations of this, franchise and fan base on your shoulders? Can you just do that? And then can you just slowly build off of that, right? Josh Allen wasn't Josh Allen in year one. So can Trey Lance just kind of ease into it and just look like a starting level quarterback next season? And I would say that's successful.
100%. I agree. I like take the win-loss record out, and if the 49ers end up, God forbid, 8-9, but I can point to an entire season of Trey Lance showing me that he's going to be the guy, even if there are times where he may have made mistakes that would lose them games, then I consider that successful. I feel that, unfortunately, Trey Lance is going to be under the pressure of, you need to do at least what Jimmy Garoppolo did with this team, which is go to the NFC title game, which I think is completely unfair, especially when we're talking about the little that he's played. So for me, win-loss record, playoffs, it doesn't really correlate to me to a successful season for Trey Lance, because there is a world where Trey doesn't show me the things I want to see and that team makes a deep playoff run, and I still can say I don't feel as good about certain things. So again, it's less about that and more about the people who are on the Jimmy Garoppolo side that will look at Trey Lance and say, you need to at least do what Jimmy did. And I think that's completely unfair. And that is unfair expectations to put on the kid. Let's move on though real quick, Akash. The other thing that's going on, Deebo Samuel scrubs his Instagram, doesn't want, he doesn't follow anybody, any of those things. right? For me, when that thing sort of happens, I say that's just a negotiation tactic. I'm not necessarily reading too much into it. But then he follows him back. Now he's liking pro Deebo Samuel tweets from or pictures from John Lynch. What's your read on this whole situation? And I guess the final question, and I'll let you expand on it, is how do you see this all playing out in the end?
Yeah. Back to where we started in, March or April when Deebo Samuel scrubbed his Instagram. I think you and I kind of thought along the same lines, like, okay, like, is this really that big of a deal? Scrubbed his Instagram, like, whatever. And then it just got weirder, right? Just, his brother was out saying stuff about them requesting a trade and not returning to San Francisco. And then the Jeff Darlington report came out that, Deebo Samuel officially requested a trade. And it just got weirder and weirder with every passing action. And Deebo Samuel was just heavily under scrutiny for like every liked tweet, every, Instagram story he put up. And the entire fan base was just paying attention to it. And, if you're a 26-year-old, 27-year-old, however old Deebo Samuel is, and you just went on that playoff run and that close to the season, you felt like you just put the team on your back. And he did, right? That play in Chicago, you and I talk about it all the time. You were there in Chicago where he had that 83-yard catch and run to basically save their season. And then all the moments he had, I mean, just throw in his highlights from last season, you're like, holy shit, this guy is just on a completely different level, and just made like play after play down the stretch. Week 18 against the Rams, in Dallas, in Green Bay, and then again in Los Angeles for the NFC title game. And then I'm sure he's thinking, man, I'm going to get the bag this offseason from this team. I'm going to be beloved by this franchise, blah, blah, blah. And that's not how the 49ers do business, right? It's not what they did with George Kittle. It's not what they did with Fred Warner. They slow play these negotiations. They know they have till training camp to get a deal struck. So they start low. And I understand that from the business standpoint. And, we've heard from folks that have negotiated with Parag. He's a brutal negotiator. He'll tell you straight to your face, like, the things you struggle at, what you've done in the past, and why the team thinks this is what you're worth, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure that was tough for Deebo Samuel to hear, or Deebo Samuel's agent to hear, after the run that he went on as a 26-year-old who's in this position for the first time, negotiating your new contract that's going to be life-changing. And so he was probably like, damn, I'm done with this team, like scrubbing your Instagram, unfollowing them, all that stuff. He's like, I want nothing to do with this. I want out. And then you realize, no team's going to, give up the draft capital that the 49ers were looking for. And the likeliest scenario is that you're going to be back on the team in 2022. And after A.J. Brown's deal, and you see the numbers, you realize it's more realistic for the 49ers to have put a long-term extension in place with Deebo Samuel. And now they've got a couple months to take care of it. So it feels like now he's kind of realized, like, man, I don't think anyone's going to trade for me. And so now it's, kind of just patching up that relationship and getting over some of those hurt feelings from negotiations.
100%. And I'm glad you brought up Chicago, because not only did he save the 49ers season, he saved Jimmy Garoppolo's job. And what nobody saw on the sidelines was Trey Lance was warming up at halftime. And that's not an opinion. That's not me reading too far into things. Trey Lance isn't warming up during games. Just doesn't happen, guys. And that was a 3rd and 17, whatever it was.
3rd and 18, yeah.
Right. That screen was designed to just give Mitch Wisnowski a little bit more room to punt, not for him to take it all the way to the crib. So again, I think you're absolutely right. When we hear about the negotiation tactics, I believe George Kittle's agent described the first offer as the St. Valentine's Day massacre, right? And I think that, again, there is a track record of these negotiations starting this way. And for me, Deebo just handled it a different way than George did. George just didn't go to social media and started doing things. That doesn't take away from what's actually happening. So again, it is what it is. I think that you're absolutely right, where it was, hey, here's the number and here's where we're starting at. And, we'll talk about it. And yeah, you know what? Deebo tried to pull a power play. His team did. And they tried to see if the 49ers would blink. They played chicken. Now here's where we are. And I think that money will heal all wounds. And you're absolutely right about the A.J. Brown. Yeah, and the A.J. Brown deal, it puts the 49ers in a spot where, man, that's actually not even that bad when you really look at what he got, right? It's not bad. And you can definitely meet that number, especially when you consider that number is going to be on next year's books more and as a cap hit than it is this year, being that he's under the same salary. So I think you're 100% right. My issue was, for all the people that like jumped out the window and said, oh my God, he's gone off of the off of the initial scrubbing and off of the initial unfollowing, whatever it was. When he followed them back, you need to kind of throw a parade then, right? Because he's like, if we're going by your thought process and that is the end all be all, then when he follows them back, then okay, he's coming back. It's still not done yet, though. That's the thing about it. So what it is initially, obviously, Deebo was upset. And the way the social media is used in negotiations, and also, let's just be frank, by 20-something-year-olds is a bit emotional. And I kind of hearkened it to, hey, you're 20-something, you and your girlfriend have a little disagreement. You want to get back at your girlfriend, archive those photos of her and just like hide them real quick. And, and then when everything's fine, you bring those photos back, right? It doesn't mean that you're trying to break up with her. You're trying to send a message. And that's what Deebo was doing. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the age group that he's in, the age that we live in. And I think that people have more of a problem with the new way that negotiations are going than the way that Deebo handled it. It's going to be more and more frequent. We saw it with Kyler Murray. We saw it with A.J. Brown. We saw it with Deebo Samuel. And you will see this happen more and more down the line. But I think you're absolutely right. At this point, they're back at the same place that they were in the beginning. No trade happened. Once pick 10 went off the board, that's it. The 49ers were not going to trade Deebo Samuel for future assets. That's literally does not make sense, especially when you have all that team control. So for me, everything is starting to get back into shape. Now, what's the money going to look like? It's going to look like A.J. Brown, but I feel much better about it, and I think that this thing definitely gets done closer to training camp. And he may not be at OTAs. Maybe there'll be some fines or something like that. But they'll figure all that out and they'll get it done.
Agree, completely agree. And the other thing, the Titans gave up A.J. Brown for a first and a third. The Niners would not have given up Deebo Samuel for pick 18 and a third-round pick. The Titans were up against the cap. They've got Ryan Tannehill locked in for nearly $40 million. They've got a bunch of defensive players that they've signed. I think they're over the salary cap next season, and they've only got like 20-something players signed, whereas the 49ers have a ton of cap space with Jimmy Garoppolo coming off the books and, a rookie or a rookie contract at quarterback. And so they've got, this is the time for them to be able to sign players like Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa at extensions. And I'm sure the 49ers would gladly do the deal that A.J. Brown just signed. But I think, Deebo Samuel, like you mentioned, had this power play because he was probably looking to get paid even more than what the 49ers had offered him up front. And obviously, when you're under contract and you're, a player like Deebo Samuel, it's going to be tough because the 49ers asking price is going to be sky high because you're an extremely valuable player on their team. And then on top of that, the trading team has to now pay you as well. So it was always going to be tough to see him get moved. But if it was going to happen, it was going to happen before the draft. It didn't. So like you mentioned, I think it's all going to get sorted out. And then when 19 scores next season, catching it from Trey Lance, all the fans are going to forget about scrubbing of the Instagram and the like tweets of him in a Cowboys jersey. Like all that stuff's going to go out the window when 19 houses it, in week 1.
100%. What's the number that you see them kind of getting to at this point?
Yeah, so a couple things. A lot of people talk about the average annual value. I think they're going to get over that $25 million mark. A.J. Brown's right at 25. I think they'll do like 25.1 or 25.2, so just something so that Deebo Samuel feels like he got a better deal than A.J. Brown. But ultimately, like with Trent Williams' contract, like with A.J. Brown's contract, the teams just put a bunch of non-guaranteed salary in the back end of the deal to boost that number so that the player feels good. Like, man, I'm a $25 million player, yet, really the salary is non-guaranteed at the back end. A.J. Brown got $40 million guaranteed up front. I think Deebo Samuel probably gets more like 43, 44. I think DJ Moore's at like $42 million guaranteed. So I think Deebo Samuel exceeds both of those guys, but he doesn't get, what Tyreek Hill got, what Devontae Adams got, what Stephon Diggs got. Deebo Samuel in a vacuum may be a better player than those three, but he just doesn't have the body of work that those three guys have to demand the guarantees that those players did, in my opinion. So I think somewhere in the 42, 43, $44 million guaranteed, get him over $25 million, annually, and we've got a deal in place. And Deebo Samuel being a second-round pick, I don't know how he can turn down that money up front, right? You're getting $40 million up front. And I'm not sure he can turn that down and, play on a $4 million contract this year and then, just be like, I'll hit free agency next year or whatever. So I think that's why.
Yeah, and it's funny because DJ Moore is like what 23 years old still too, and then I'm glad that you brought up the the money that he made, because it's crazy to me that he's that young and everything. And I'm glad you brought up the second round pick thing. It's true. Like second round picks usually don't fetch that as well too. But yeah, I agree. It's somewhat in that ballpark. It's just going to be enough. So like again, when Trent Williams became the highest paid left tackle, it was by like what, like $100,000.
Like 100,000. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So like they're petty like that. They'll do things like that too. I do think it does get done as well too. And yeah, 100%. I'm with you on this one. So let's shift gears. And before we do that, guys, make sure that you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, join the Spicy Squad so you can do the call-in shows as well. Make sure that you follow Akash as well too. He does great work on Twitter, Mr. 23K on Twitter as well too. I mean, he writes for Niners Nation, part of the Shannon plan with KP. Two guys that I really admire when it comes to their football knowledge. So I need you guys to check that out as well too. Let's shift gears a little bit. Do you feel that the 49ers have improved in this offseason? Now that the draft is over, the dust is settled, there are some free agents out there to be had. Hi, Julio Jones, go ahead and sign him.
Your favorite receiver of all time?
Oh, yeah, favorite receiver. Having Julio Jones on my team would just be the greatest thing that I've ever seen. I haven't had my favorite player play for the 49ers since Terrell Owens being there. But do you feel that this 49ers team has improved this year?
I think so. Okay. And a lot of people, I know they point back to Jimmy Garoppolo's $6 million cap hit, and they say, well, that's on the salary cap. If they had traded him, or if they had, cut him, they could have used that salary cap space and signed some other players, and they could have made the team even better. But, at depth, we talked about two position groups that killed the 49ers last season. The secondary, because they had Josh Norman out there, and then the special teams, because for whatever reason, they couldn't cover on kicks, they couldn't cover on punts, and it was just always a mess. Like, you just had to hold on to your ass whenever special teams came out on the field. And I think they improved upon both of those position groups, first. Obviously, they had a Charvarius Ward. Do I think he's in the elite tier of corner? No. But is he better than what they have on the roster? Absolutely. He's going to be one of their starting corners. He's going to be really good. You have Emmanuel Mosley and Jason Verrett on the other side. And Jason Verrett now isn't penciled in as a starter. He's penciled in as depth. So if he's healthy, that's an even bigger bonus. Then you go out and draft two guys, Tariq Castro-Fields, Samuel Womack. You get Ambry Thomas and Lenore coming back. So that secondary now looks a lot deeper. I know they don't have Kwaski Tart. He's still a free agent. I don't know if the door is closed there or what, but I think that's probably the area of concern, right? Who starts at safety opposite of Jimmy Ward? They just have a bunch of names there. George Odom, Tarvarius Moore, Talanoa Funga, who I think they're really high on internally, but that's probably the biggest question mark is who starts at safety. But I think they're second in the offseason, which I probably hadn't heard of before they signed them, and you as well. But those guys are good at what they do, right? The linebacker, Oren Burks from Green Bay. George Odom, he's an Auburn. Brian Schneider, who was a really good coordinator, who I think is going to be an upgrade over Richard Hightower. So that unit's going to be better. So those were the two biggest weaknesses, I would say. Then some areas where I think they could have done a better job, probably what do they think of Aaron Banks? You got Dan Brunskill again at right guard. Is Alex Mack coming back? It feels like it. But that's where I would say is the biggest question mark is the interior of the offensive line. I think they got deeper at other positions, though, like I mentioned. Secondary looks a lot better. Drafted Drake Jackson. Their linebacking crew was really good last season. And then offensively, skill position-wise, I thought as long as Deebo Samuel is on this team week one, they're going to be fine, right? Brandon Ayuk, in the draft, and they just get some guys coming back from last season. So I think this is a really, really good roster. I think it actually stacks up with the Rams. I know a lot of people just don't put them on that tier because of the quarterback situation. But as a team, if you go position of how does the quarterback position look? How does Trey Lance look going into next season? And if he's good, then I think this is a really, really good team on paper.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with you there. And maybe this is the optimist in me. But based on the way that Drake Jackson fits in kind of as a D Ford replacement off the bat, being a pass rush specialist, where D Ford, he was that guy. He didn't really help too much in run defense. And I think that Drake Jackson actually has that chance to grow. There are guys that I feel that they drafted that kind of profile as safeties, right? Tariq Castro Fields, I feel like profiles better as a safety, in my opinion. I think that he can be one of those guys. And I think you're right. I think in the building they are very high on Hufanga. They'll see what they have in Odom. They'll see what they have in Tarvarius Moore. I think that's the only real question mark. But as far as the cornerback room, this is the deepest cornerback room that Shanahan and Lynch have had this entire time. And that is something that they can marry this pass rush with for the first time and say that they have it on both sides. And if Jason Verrett is somebody that can contribute, then it's just another ace in your sleeve or, a feather in your cap at that point. And it makes passing on other guys. There's still some other guys that you can get out there as well, too. Like, I know that James Bradbury was just released today. 49er fans, let me just put the spoiler alert out there. They're not going to be in. Yeah, they're not going to be in on him at all. So, but I think that for the first time on defense, while this was the top 5 defense last year, you have a chance to improve on that this year, especially if Javon Kinlaw is what many people think he is, and if Drake Jackson can be that contributor on every down. And then you're talking about this rotation, which the rotation, the defensive line rotation, let's just, be frank, was the reason that the 49ers were able to close out games, especially down the stretch. I mean, Omenihu, Jordan Willis, and, right, Arden Key, all those guys, they were all able to keep fresh legs, and you were able to keep those guys going. So, and let's just keep it a buck. Eric Armstead had his best season as a 49er, I felt, last year, and if he can continue to play inside, I think that makes this defense that much more ferocious. And also, DeMeco Ryans is back for his last season, I feel, as the 49ers defensive coordinator, because there's no way that he's sticking around on this roster. I mean, on this as not a head coach next year. But on the offensive side, I think many of the things that, if let's say the defense does take a step back, depends on the player Trey Lance. And if Trey Lance can be just a just slight improvement or just a little bit more from what Jimmy Garoppolo offered, especially when things are not going right? When things aren't perfect, when the play call is not perfect, or the defense isn't showing you everything, or maybe the pass rush gets there too fast. If Trey Lance can give you that little bit of increase, it's able to, on the back end, take care of other things and kind of cover that up. You're able to keep drives going. You keep your defense off the field if they're struggling. Those type of things. If it's 3rd and 9 and you're able to pick that up with your legs, and Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't, you keep a drive going in those ways. I think that's a lot of the optimism that I have with this team as well. And you nailed it on the head. I think in this offseason and in this draft, they were like, man, we're done with the special teams thing. We are going to make sure that we have this thing locked in. And for the first time, I feel, in this draft, the 49ers kind of bet on measurables and athletes. And I think they were just tired of having these guys get down the field and kind of just let things get by them. Now they've got guys that can fly down the field and make plays. And the special teams is something where the 49ers were, I believe it was 20th in punt return average and 28th in kickoff return average.
It was bad.
That number, if that number even goes up a little bit and your starting drive points are at different points, then the 49ers are starting to sit in better position, and you're starting to put Trey Lance in a good spot. And then when you look at the running game, and I feel like that Tyrion Davis-Price pick was to tell Deebo, hey, man, we're not trying to give you the ball this much in the backfield. We have a guy now that can take all of those hits. I think if they can get back to the run game, and I think that the wrinkles that Anthony Lynn is going to add in as well with all of these things, I think this makes this team very dynamic. Also, one thing, and I kind of want to go back to the first thing that we were talking about. If somebody's talking to somebody on the staff and they underwhelmed, who exactly are you talking to? Scangarello's not there. McDaniel is gone. The quarterback, the running back coach is gone. Who are you speaking to? There is no holdovers from last year at this point. Who were you speaking to? That's why it kind of points me to Scangarello. This whole offensive, and again, the 49ers do a great job of promoting guys, getting guys other jobs. But these guys that are there, they're not there this year that were there from last year. So where are you hearing this from? That's why it kind of just points more and more to that rich guy a little bit more. But at the same time, I am going to feel optimistic. I am going to put on my optimistic hat, and I do think that the 49ers have improved, especially if Trey Lance is at least a little bit of what we think he'll be at least a little bit of what we think he can be at this point.
And sometimes we get in the weeds in the offseason and we're like, oh man, they didn't sign this player or that player. And then you go back to last season and down the stretch, weren't they like 7-2 or 7-3? And the games they lost against Tennessee and Seattle, I mean, we were at one or both of those. And it was special teams and it was Jimmy Garoppolo.
Interceptions.
The reason they lost both, it was just interceptions, right? The main reasons that they lost both those games. And if Trey Lance is just a smidge better, if the special teams is just a smidge better, probably winning both of those games. So I still think it's a really, really good team on paper. It just isn't getting the attention nationally that the Rams or the Packers or the Bucs are, just because of the quarterbacks that they have at the helm and the success they've had. Otherwise, I think they'd be mentioned right up there with those teams, because I think they can beat or compete with anybody in the NFC.
Yep, I agree. One last question, and then we'll get out of here, Akash, because you've been so gracious with your time. I appreciate you, bro. This team is a playoff team, right?
Oh, this upcoming team? Hell yeah. Absolutely. No doubt about it. The NFC is a very, very weak conference, at least compared to the AFC. I don't know if they win the division, because I think it'll come down between them and the Rams. I think those are the two best teams in the division. I think the Cardinals take a step back, right, with some of the Kyler Murray drama. I just think they've lost some of the personnel from last year. I don't know if they're going to be as good. And I think it's just going to be between the 49ers and Rams for the NFC West. And I just think they're a playoff team. I mean, name 7 playoff teams in the NFC that aren't the 49ers. I have a hard time doing it.
I think you probably have Green Bay, Tampa Bay, the Rams. That's 3 right off the bat. And then after that, it's pretty wide open. I mean, it's going to be whoever wins the NFC East. I would suspect that that's Dallas.
Philly's not going to be bad either.
Philly won't be bad. The Saints, that division, the Panthers, the Falcons. I mean, it's again, when you look at how many teams are allowed to get in now with 7, it's hard for me to envision, unless this team completely goes in the tank with either injuries or just, God forbid, the thing that I won't say. I just find it hard for the 49ers to not be in the playoffs. I mean, nobody's scared of the Vikings or, the Saints necessarily, or, even like Seattle's done now at this point. There could be a possibility that there are 3, again, NFC West teams that make the playoffs. That absolutely makes sense at this point. But I think you hit the nail on the head with the Cardinals, man. Like, how do you lose DeAndre Hopkins for 6 games and lose Chandler Jones and look me in the face and say you improved? I don't see how you can say that that's possible. And also, the elephant in the room is, Cliff Kingsbury is a dripped out guy, but what does he know about coaching down the stretch, right? So, at the same time,
they've fallen apart the last 3 years, and it's like, is Kyler Murray happy with the situation there? Like, what's going on? He's not going to report until he gets a new deal, and it just seems a little too messy. And I think the Cardinals kind of had like all the things go their way to start the year last year, and they crumble down the stretch. So I just don't see them having that type of season again. And I think the 49ers and Rams success is a little bit more sustainable than the Cardinals one.
Well, thank God Colt McCoy is not starting. So I think that's the best thing we can say about the Cardinals.
That was the low light of the season, man. I forgot that.
That was when I kind of like jumped off the bridge, and my viewers they let me have it all the time about it, because I was just like, yeah, you know what, pack up, the season is done. Guess who's a bozo? Me. But that's what I get for not being level headed. So
we all thought that. I did too. The real extreme people were like, fire Kyle Shanahan. Like, how can this happen?
Oh no, I didn't think that.
God. I didn't think that either. But I mean, they got boat raced at home.
And it was just really bad to see, just especially because Hopkins was hurt, and then Chase Edmonds goes down in the first game, and then James Conner's all of a sudden Walter Payton, and Colt McCoy is kicking your ass, and it's just, it wasn't a fun time. But I wish, if I had any regrets from the season, it would be for me to be much more level-headed when things like that happen. I think that I learned from my mistakes. Similar to Trey Lance, I had my bumps and bruises last year, and you know what, this year I'm ready to go. So.
Even in week 18, I mean, when Jimmy Garoppolo threw the second interception, I was like, oh my God, how can you play Jimmy Garoppolo off this thumb injury? Like, what are you doing? They're going to blow their chance. And then he came back and won. So, I think we can all learn to just be a little bit more patient with this team. But, when you root for them, when you're a fan, you live and die with them. So,
right.
I don't blame you.
That game, I remember that was the first time that my Apple Watch was like, your heart rate is 103 beats per minute, and you're not active right now at this point. That was the first time that I've ever seen my watch do that. And you know what? For all of those things, it made last season very fun. I mean, obviously, it wasn't the result that we wanted. You and I were both at SoFi for the unfortunate end to that season, but it was a blast last year. Hey, Akash, 45 minutes in. Thank you so much for your time. Akash, tell everybody where to follow you, all of the things that you have going on, and everything as well, too.
Yeah, appreciate you, first of all. You're doing a fantastic job with this channel, just having different guests on and doing your thing. So it's cool to see. I know you were at both the combine and the draft. So it's cool to see from where you started to where you are now. And yeah, man, that's just cool. So you can find me at Twitter at AKASHANAV, NinersNation.com. Go check us out. Niners Nation Podcast Network. Me and KP do our podcast Shannon Plan every Wednesday. So check that out. And yeah, just appreciate you for having me again.
No, I mean, you know what it is. And it's true, Akash. It feels like it's been a little too long. This is a long way from last year when we did like those big round tables where like nobody had a chance to speak. Yeah, and I had to learn a little bit from that. But then again, that was all while we were trying to sift through who's the pick at 3.
Matt got 3.
Yeah, dude, that time is the wildest time ever, man. And I didn't think it could be duplicated, but this offseason is kind of giving last offseason a run for its money a little bit in terms of that, because we still had there was still something that could happen that would change all those things. Right now, all of these things that are happening around, we're just trying to figure out what the hell is going on and trying to make sense of it. But yeah, appreciate you, bro. And yeah, we got to do this again as well too, man. And we definitely will. But yeah, guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you. I know the Warriors are on. I want you guys to get back to your game and everything as well. Shout out to everybody that's in here. Shout out to the Spicy Squad. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell for when we go live. A lot of content coming this week, but make sure that you follow Akash, one of the best in the business, one of the guys that I look up to for sure. Even if I'm like 12 years older than him, I definitely look up to Akash in terms of what he does and in terms of his content and everything as well too. So for Akash and for Jason, shout out to you guys, and let's go Niners. Welcome, everybody. Let's go Niners. My name is Jason Aponte.